Welcome everyone, welcome back. Today in episode 4, we talk about the negative aspects of community criticism and how these can actually hurt us. And we're going to get a little insight from Jim, how we can actually help each other overcome criticism. And along with that same idea, we may hear a few people who are burnt out, or maybe if the noise is getting too great, you may have a question like this.
Okay.
So what do I do if my community is too critical and negative about everything?
Okay, that's a very fair question. It's a little hard to know the context of this question.
Yep.
Is it a leader saying everybody's griping about everything I do?
Yep.
Or is it just I'm a person in the group and just a bunch of negative people? I mean, we can't discern that from this question.
But let's say if it's about the leaders, if my community, the leaders saying everything's just too critical. Is it maybe because of burnout they are critical, or maybe they are negative about everything because they are just too tired? We do not know. So
maybe they're jealous.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they don't like me. I mean, maybe who knows? But I think the one thing that we have to do is these things don't go away.
Right.
They may burrow down deeper,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll come out in 6 months and destroy a group.
That's right.
So I think we as a leader have to be proactive.
Mm-hmm.
And we start getting a lot of flack and grief. I think we need to say, okay, at our next team meeting, we initiate and say, I just feel lately it seems like there's been kind of a negative attitude, in our midst. And I wonder if that's something we have to address here tonight. You as a leader, you have to be big enough not to be threatened, not to be defensive, not try to justify everything. You got to be big enough to take the hit. And if people believe that you really are capable of hearing their complaints without, running out of the room crying or screaming at them or something like that, if they really start talking, this is the safest place to vent this. What you do not want to happen, everybody speaks about the problems. Everybody tells everybody except you. Everybody in the room knows what's going on except you, and you're like, what? You're like a deer about to get hit by a car, if you'll pardon the expression. Yeah. Number 8, God rest his soul. We've got to be willing to initiate dialogue that's negative.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes you get a boil or an infection, and sometimes they have to go in and cut the thing open and clean it out for the healing process to begin.
Sure.
I would have to say, in my personal experience, one of the greatest weaknesses of the charismatic renewal that I think retards the authentic spiritual growth is I think our relationships are quite superficial.
That's right.
And what I mean by that, nobody ever is comfortable enough to say, I disagree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I love you. I think you're a good person. I'm sorry, I just don't see it that way. We don't do that. So we all sit there and okay. The minute we're out of the room, I don't buy that for a minute. That is destructive behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So as a leader, you've got to create an environment where people feel they can actually talk. Now here's something interesting. Because of the uniqueness of people, some people, if you create the safe environment, some people will be comfortable in talking. Some people, no matter how safe it is, the way that they relate to others, they could never say that in a group.
Right.
So what you have to do is you have to create a group opportunity, and you also have to create an individual opportunity.
Sure.
You have your meeting, you all talk, and you don't say it in front of the person, you don't embarrass them, but later on you're getting coffee, and you just happen to get next to Barbara or Joe and say, hey Joe, I noticed tonight at the meeting you weren't saying much. Is there anything that maybe we could talk about, just the two of us? Now you're not doing that behind people's backs. As a leader, you're creating an opportunity because that's how that person communicates. One of the huge mistakes of leaders is every leader has their own communication style.
That's right.
And we communicate in our style, and we presume everybody else communicates in my style. Why do you think that? Why do you think just because you're the leader, everybody's going to conform to your style?
True.
It's a huge miscalculation that has probably been one of the greatest causes of problems within the renewal. So you have to create an opportunity where people can do this. Now that's one side of the story. The other possibility is that people are jealous.
Sure.
The other possibility is that there's just a bunch of kind of negative gossipers in the group, and they just poison things. And let's not discount the reality that Diablo, Satan, the one who divides, would love to turn us against each other. So there's probably a human dimension, and there's probably a spiritual dimension.
Sure.
And I would say if you create opportunities and environment for dialogue, that's an essential thing. But then we get into this whole interpersonal dynamics and just spiritual realities. That's where I think we need to go into prayer. God might give us some insight. We might have to, as a leader, fast and pray for 3 or 4 days, asking God to protect us from that. But start with this one. Start with opportunity and environment for dialogue in a very prayerful place. And you as a leader, you got to be big enough to be able to take the hit and not punch back.
Right. We hope you enjoy episode 4 where Jim talked about criticism. In episode 5 and 6, it's the question that you have all been asking about same-sex attraction in leaders and how we can actually be forgiving and caring. So let's see you in episode 5 and 6.